I have too many interests, and for a long time, I thought that meant something was wrong with me. You know that feeling when someone asks, "What are you into?" and your brain just freezes? Not because you have nothing to say, but because you have too much. The tech side of you, the creative side, the one who reads weird stuff at 2 a.m., the one who wants to travel, the one who wants to build something, the one who also just wants to make art sometimes. All of them are real, but somehow that makes you feel like none of them are. That's what this video is about. Not how to pick one thing, not how to stay focused, a completely different way to hold all of it that I've been figuring out myself, and by the end of this, you're going to see your chaos differently. These are real Reddit posts: ADHD, get disciplined, life. 3 completely different communities, same exact feeling. I have too many interests, so I feel like I have no personality. A mess of ideas, too many interests, not enough time. Now here's what's interesting about this. These aren't niche communities. These are millions of people from completely different backgrounds, all describing the same internal experience. Which tells you something important. This isn't an ADHD thing, this isn't a Gen Z thing, this is a human thing. But our generation feels it more intensely than any before us. And there's a structural reason for that. Think about what we grew up with. The internet didn't just give us access to information, it gave us access to entire worlds we would never have found otherwise. One algorithm rabbit hole, and suddenly you're obsessed with urban architecture. Another, and you want to learn Japanese, start a company, make music, understand how AI works, and get seriously good at cooking. All before you're 25. Previous generations had fewer doors. Not because they were less curious, but because the doors were harder to find. That friction helped people feel focused. Not because focus is natural, but because access was limited. We have no friction. Every interest is one search away. Every skill has a free tutorial. And so we collect interests the way people used to collect physical things. Except there's no shelf space limit, no natural stopping point, just more and more things that genuinely excite us, with no framework for what to do with all of them. And then, here's where it gets uncomfortable. We open social media, and we see people who seem to have one thing, one aesthetic, one niche, one clean, legible identity. And we start to feel like our chaos means we haven't figured ourselves out yet, like everyone else has a personality, and we're just a browser with too many tabs open. But here's the thing about those people with the clean, focused, single interest identity. Most of them aren't less curious than you. They've just made a choice, consciously or not, about what to show. The niche is a curation decision, not a personality one, and we've been consuming curated versions of people for so long. We've started to believe curation is the same as authenticity. It's not, but that's not even the most interesting part, because once you understand what having many interests actually means, the whole story changes. There's a word I want to introduce: multipotentialite. Coined by writer Emily Wapnick, it describes people who have many different passions and creative pursuits. Not people who can't focus. People whose natural mode of engaging with the world is broad rather than narrow, at least initially. And the research around this is genuinely interesting. Multipotentialites tend to learn new domains faster because they bring frameworks from completely unrelated fields. They make connections that specialists miss entirely. They're often the people who end up doing things that didn't exist before because they needed something that required knowledge from 2 different areas, and they happened to have both. The problem isn't that you have too many interests. The problem is that the career model, the identity model, the social media model, they were all designed for specialists. Pick a lane, build a brand, own a niche, but what if the model is just too small? Think about the skills most valued right now. The ability to communicate complex ideas simply. That's someone who understands both the technical world and the human world. The ability to build and sell. That's a technical person who also understands psychology. The ability to use AI creatively. That's someone who knows enough about technology and creativity to bridge both. None of those are specialist skills. Every single one is the result of someone who refused to pick just one thing. Your many interests aren't a liability. They're a library. The question isn't how to reduce the collection, it's how to know which books to reach for, and when. Now, here's where I get personal, because everything I just said I'm not saying from the other side of having figured it out. I'm saying it from the middle of it. When I was younger, art, dancing, robotics, badminton, I was genuinely into all of it. Robotics especially. I actually wanted to pursue that, but circumstances don't always care about what you want. I ended up on a path that wasn't my choice. I stayed on it for years. It was hard, emotionally hard, in ways that are difficult to explain unless you've been there. But I didn't quit. Partly stubbornness, partly because quitting wasn't really an option at the time. What pulled me out wasn't a mindset shift. It wasn't a video, it was my friends. They helped me start actually living again. And slowly the interests came back. Sports, fitness, travel, first with friends, then a solo trip I funded from internship savings. Content creation, which had always pulled at me since I was a teenager. Not for views, but because I've always been drawn to storytelling. To the idea that something you make could reach even one person and mean something to them. Coding, because I still want to build things. Apps, startups. That never went away. And now, right now, I want to create content, build apps, travel, stay fit, learn Blender, get better at video editing and sound design, keep up with new tech, and do all of it well. Some days that feels exciting, other days it just feels like a mess. What I've started to realize, slowly, is that the chaos isn't the problem. The chaos without a system is the problem. And those are two very different things. But here's something most people never talk about when they discuss having too many interests. And it might be the most important piece. So stay with me. Social media didn't just change how we share our lives. It changed how we think about identity itself. Before the internet, your identity was mostly private. People who knew you understood you were a complex person with many sides. The idea that you'd need to compress yourself into a consistent, scroll-friendly persona for thousands of strangers, that's completely new. But we've internalized it so deeply that we now apply it to our private sense of self. We don't just worry about how we look online. We've started to feel like if we can't explain ourselves cleanly in 2 sentences, we don't really have a self at all. Your identity is not your personal brand. Your personal brand is a communication tool. It's what you choose to emphasize for a specific audience in a specific context. Your identity is the full, messy, evolving human underneath all of that. The two don't have to match. A full human is always going to be too complex to reduce to a niche. The people who seem to have it all figured out. The clean aesthetic, the focused identity, many of them are just better at editing. The rest of their chaos is still there. You just can't see it because they chose not to show it. Gen Z in particular has been building public selves since we were teenagers. A lot of us picked a lane early, before we really knew who we were. And now some of us are in our early 20s looking at the lane we picked and thinking, this is too narrow. There's so much more I want to be. That feeling isn't a crisis. That's your actual self pushing back against a box you were handed too early. And that's growth. Okay, so we've established the chaos is valid and the identity pressure is largely a construct. But I also don't want to just leave you with validation and no tools. So here's the framework I've been using. I call it the interest stack. The interest stack is a way to sort what you're drawn to into 4 buckets, not to limit them, but to stop treating all of them with the same urgency. Because that urgency is what exhausts you. When everything feels equally important, nothing actually moves. The stack gives your interests addresses, and that changes how the chaos feels. The first layer is what I call fuel. These are the interests with realistic potential to generate income for you, now or soon. Design, marketing, content creation, coding. They don't have to be your most passionate interests, but they're the ones that fund everything else. Knowing which of your interests can be fuel changes how you invest your time in them. The second layer is freedom. These are the things you do purely because they make you feel alive. No monetization plan, no audience, no goal other than the experience of doing them. Music you play in your room, the solo trip you take, these are sacred and they need to be protected. The moment you try to monetize everything, the freedom interests start to die. And when they die, you lose the energy that feeds everything else. The third layer is foundation. These are the things you're learning because your life genuinely needs them right now. Financial literacy, a specific skill that opens a door. Communication, writing, not always exciting, but they're the infrastructure your other interests run on. Everything else becomes more effective when the foundation is solid. And the fourth layer is field. These are the things you're just exploring. No commitment, no plan. Blender, a new language. A random skill you picked up last week. You're curious, you're poking around, and you might come back to them, or you might not. The mistake most multi-interested people make is treating every field interest like it needs to become a fuel interest. It doesn't. Some things are allowed to just be interesting. When you sort your interests into the interest stack, two things happen. First, you stop feeling guilty about the field ones, because you've acknowledged them without obligating yourself to them. Second, you can give real energy to fuel and freedom without feeling like you're neglecting everything else. The chaos doesn't go away, but it has addresses now. But there's one more thing, and honestly, this is the part most people never get to, because most videos on this topic stop at the framework. This one doesn't. There's a story we get sold about multi-interested people. One day you'll find your one thing, and once you do, everything else fades away and you'll finally feel focused and whole. It's a comforting story. But it's not true. The people who seem most purposeful, when you actually talk to them, don't describe a moment where everything clicked into one thing. They describe a slow accumulation, an interest that kept coming back, a skill that kept being useful in different contexts, a theme that showed up in everything they were drawn to, even when the surface topics were completely different. Purpose isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a pattern you notice over time, and you only notice it by doing things, trying, switching, returning. Accumulating experience. The people waiting to feel ready before committing to anything are actually preventing the very process that would give them clarity. When I look back at everything I've been drawn to, art, robotics, storytelling, coding, content, travel, fitness, on the surface it looks random, but there is a thread. Building things, creating things, understanding how the world works, and then doing something with that understanding. Every single interest I've ever had is about making something or experiencing something fully. That's the thread. But I could only see it after living it. I couldn't have found it by thinking from the outside in. Your many interests aren't stopping you from finding your thing. They are your thing, in its current, still-forming state. The question isn't which one do I choose. The question is, what thread runs through all of them? Find that, even if it takes years, and you'll have something more true and more sustainable than any niche you could have picked at 19. I started this video by saying I have too many interests, and for a long time I thought that meant something was wrong with me. I still have too many interests: content creation, app building, travel, fitness, Blender, video editing, new tech, all of it. But the way I hold it has changed. I'm not trying to collapse it into one thing anymore. The years I spent on a path that wasn't mine, that wasn't wasted time. The interests I came back to after all of that feel chosen now. I know what it's like not to have them, and that makes me take them more seriously. I've started thinking about all of this as a beautiful problem. Not a crisis, not a character flaw, a beautiful problem. The kind that means you're alive, curious, and not done yet. If you watched this whole video, you're probably carrying a version of this too. And I just want to say, you're not behind. You're not broken. You're someone with a wide inner world trying to figure out how to live in it. And that's actually one of the more interesting problems a person can have. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the interest you feel most guilty about having? The one you can never quite justify. I read every single one. Subscribe if this is the kind of conversation you want more of. This channel is going to keep going into the things that are actually hard to talk about. See you in the next one.